role of the party in the last 10 or 15 years.
Well, what is the role of the Liberal Democrats, not in the last 10 or 15 years, but in the next 3 years?
Well, in the next 3 years, I think we have a genuinely radical, and I don't want to sort of get on my party political soapbox and preach things that you read every day in terms of Lib Dem press releases, but I do believe we have a radical set of policy proposals on the environment, a redistributive tax system. We are standing up for civil liberties. We're opposing identity cards. And we are putting. We are building. Let me finish. We are building. Well, the Conservatives were actually in favour of ID cards.
No,
they were in favour, and they flip-flopped
4 years
under
ago.
David Davis. So I think we're genuinely building a radical alternative to the Conservatives and Labour. And I think the one thing that Ming did, which he did many things which were beneficial and dragged the party sort of up from its knees in 2006, was that he started to articulate a narrative, and he hasn't done it well enough yet. He's talked about the cosy consensus between Labour and Tories. He's talked about this new Tory-Labour phrase we don't really like, but it's beginning to get there. And I do think that with solid party policies in place, we now need someone who can take that forward and communicate that vision, that narrative to the population at large.
Do you not think that, I mean, whether it's Nick Clegg or Chris Huhne, there needs to be some totemic radical break with the past, sort of ditch the local income tax or something like that, that will make people sit up and think, a bit like Cameron did, when he made quite clear what he was going to do, and he got the thumping great majority, the mandate to do it. Does the new leader need to have some sort of break with the past?
I think you're right about totemic policies. I mean, in the past, the Lib Dems have always caught the zeitgeist when it comes to the big tax changes, the 1p on income tax, the 50% rate of income tax. I think you're right to say if most voters look at, say, the Conservatives and the Lib Dems, although there are clear differences in policies between the Green agenda and the inheritance tax stuff, I find frankly abhorrent that the Tories have been saying recently.
It's one of the most popular policies the Tories have come up with.
It is, I'm not Tory.
No, but you're looking for votes.
But I think when sort of policies are boiled down to the way they're going to be written in newspapers, and they're going to have the kind of the Lib Dem, Labour and Conservative policies on the environment, I think you're right. I think there will be many similarities, and unless we have a leader that is incredibly charismatic, unless we have a particularly totemic policy which defines us from the other two, I think there is a risk that all three parties, not just the Lib Dems, are moving towards a centre ground which makes them indistinguishable from one another, and we are at a disadvantage in that respect because we're the smallest party and we can't command the same airtime as others.
So have you nailed your colours to any particular mast?
I would like to see Nick Clegg as the next leader.
John? I know you're not a Liberal Democrat.
I'm not a Liberal Democrat. I mean, you were talking earlier about differences between Nick Clegg and Chris Huhne. I don't see a great deal of difference. Perhaps Clegg is slightly more charismatic, but he doesn't got charismatic pouring out of every orifice. I think Huhne is quite a formidable figure. What did I say? You know, I ain't a paid or even an unpaid spokesman for Chris, but I think he wouldn't do a bad job.
You're tending towards that direction.
Can I ask John a question?
Yes.
I think Ming is a formidable figure, but he clearly hasn't succeeded in getting the Lib Dem message across to the voters. Now, one thing that people are pointing out at the moment is that when Huhne stood last time round, he only got the support of one of our 11 or 12 MEPs for the leadership election, and there's speculation that is because he was just unpopular in Europe and he upset colleagues. Now, from your experience of Chris Huhne, is that a description you recognise?
I think, given the mediocre quality of your MEPs, yes. I mean, Huhne is a man of ambition, he's driving, he's arrogant. He doesn't suffer fools gladly. I mean, surrounded by that collection of deadbeat MEPs, forgive me. Yeah, you know, he'd have got up their noses and they'd have got up his nose.
If that's the case, and I suspect that you think our parliamentary party are also...
they're better than your MEPs, but not a lot.
Do you think it's likely that he may have alienated some? Because he got a decent amount of support in 2005 or 2006 for the election when he hadn't been an MP for very long. Do you think in the elapsing 19 months he may have upset any MPs?
I honestly don't know. I suspect you know better than I do. I think he's not stupid. I think he's aware that he's an arrogant sort, and I think he's probably been played.
But he's a charming arrogant.
He's a charming. I like Chris a great deal. I think he's great.
I think this is part of the problem with the discussion about the Lib Dems.
He's serious, unlike almost everybody else you've named. Sorry, Brian.
It's okay. It's this kind of internal Westminster Village reduced discussion about the Lib Dems.
And we love it though.
But, no, it's fine. You know, it's perfect, exactly what you should discuss on this programme. But for the public at large, it's like, oh, You know, they don't know who these people are, they don't care, because the problem is, you know, the Lib Dems are not engaging with the public in a meaningful way. They're not presenting them with decent ideas, they're not challenging them to rethink things. They're coming out with kind of platitudes.
But
I mean, you know,
Brendan,
Olly talks
don't
about...
you think that that's partly down to the fact that they just can't seem to get the amount or the quality of media coverage which the other two parties
I think that's
do?
an excuse, and I think also the idea that Ming failed is a bit of an excuse as well. I mean, I don't hold a candle for Ming. I think he kind of hid away from political debate very much. But parties get the leaders they deserve. The Tory party, going through a period of crisis, not knowing what it stood for, got Cameron, who I'm afraid to say, Iain, is an empty vessel and was the perfect person to lead the Tory and to kind of reshape it along any kind of way that came along.
This is not the time to do it.
The Lib Dems got Ming when they deserved him, which is at a time when they were kind of backing off from debate. The anti-Blair, anti-war stuff was fizzling out, was no longer working, and they kind of hid in the shadows. And I think, you know, when Olly says that they have a radical agenda, and then you think, what is it? It's altering tax here and there. It's introducing green measures. These are not radical.
When you ran through that radical agenda 5 minutes ago, I almost fell asleep. It was the most boring radical agenda I've ever heard.
In which case, that's my fault, not the Liberal Democrats.
Oh, come on.
Tax is not a
come on,
radical
you're not
issue.
that
I think I think it's pretty radical to suggest reducing the bottom rate of income tax from 20p to 10p. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it is.
You are wrong. I'll tell you why. Because it's never radical to treat the public merely as taxpayers. And I think the discussion of every political issue as a tax issue is problematic because it treats people as simply financiers of
that's the very basis of politics. The only way to
it's not the basis of
make
politics.
to fund changes.
It's not the basis of politics.
It's to raise money for them.
It's the basis of how things work at an everyday level, but it's not the basis of debate. People are thirsty for debate. They want to talk about the big issues. They want to talk about liberty. They want to talk about
Brendan, what would
political
you do,
independence. They want to talk about
what would be your sort of radical policy agenda for the next, say, 10 years?
My own?
Yeah.
Well, firstly, it wouldn't be environmentalism, which is one thing that you quoted. I think I would be. I think it's radical now to be against environmentalism because environmentalism is now frequently used to bring down people's horizons, to enforce petty authoritarian measures on how we live our lives, to restrain us, to tell us to take fewer holidays, to drive less, to desire less, to consume less. That's not a radical measure. It's an authoritarian measure of austerity. So one radical thing that the Lib Dems might do, but would never actually do in a million years, would be to question environmentalism. Instead, like Cameron, they have embraced it because it's the only show in town, pretty much.
Well, we've gone over our allocated time on this subject, but we are going to return to it in a moment because it's time for our top 10 of the day. Well, Ming Campbell went out with a whimper, so today's top 10 is how he could have gone out with a bang. Number 10, in a sex and drug scandal. Number 9, caught promising cash for honours.